Okay, the aim of this particular presentation is to problematize the conduct of the projects on Dialogue for Peace during ongoing conflict over territories, because even during our project, the situation has changed dynamically. So it poses the challenge to us researchers. Additional challenge, I would like to say. And I'm going to refer to my own experience, shared experience, but also my more particular experience on doing the research that I had to narrow down to the problem of the reception of the Dialogue for Peace program sponsored by the European Union, its goals, procedures, the impact by grantees from Armenia and Azerbaijan. And this particular project I conducted in between 2020-2022. But apart from being inspired by this Termen project to do this project, I also proposed, out of the interviews that I conducted in the first project, the following project that I hoped might be practical. And it seemed to me practical not long ago, but it may not be anymore, or we should reshape, reframe this project, and I would like to ask for your help. I would like to consult with you the problems that we face now, and yeah, so I will try to present it as precisely as possible. So the project that we applied for and we received the grant within the framework of urgency grants from the Polish governmental institution. This project is entitled the Conceptualization of Dialogue in the View of the Peace Agreement and the Azerbaijan's Policy Towards Infrastructure and Armenians Living in Nagorno-Karabakh. Okay, everything started, the first project that I mentioned, so the evaluation, critical study of EU program, Dialogue for Peace, started with my encounter of the work of two persons, the album that I encountered in the private photo library in Yerevan, and that was the photo album reflecting on the human consequences of the war. And the album was prepared by Arek Balanian and Edik Bogosian, and many of you know the authors. I haven't been able to meet them in person, but we had an exchange of emails. So when I speak about critical approach to EU peace programs, I mean these two programs. Well, initially it was one program, but after 2020 it couldn't be continued in Armenia under the same title because there was no sense, there was the need to reframe it after the war, for this war. So, okay. So firstly it was, the title was Peace Building Through Capacity Enhancement and Civic Engagement, and it started in 2017 and it ended in 2019. And in parallel, it was conducted in Armenia and in Azerbaijan. For obvious reasons, I started with Armenia and interviews. Well, I will tell you more in details. I'm just justifying to adding Azerbaijan to the picture. So when I was in Armenia conducting the interviews, I realized, of course, that there was the parallel program in Azerbaijan. I was asking my interviewees what's the opinion about going and doing the same interviews in Azerbaijan, and there was not a single person who would say you shouldn't do it. Like everyone was saying, you should do it, actually. And many of those people had their personal contacts with people doing, well, say, similar work, but it's not me to judge it how similar to the end it was. So peace building through capacity enhancement, civic engagement continued under the same title in Azerbaijan in 2022, so I should actually extend it. But as for Armenia, and that was my initial point, of departure into the subject. So it continued as civic engagement, capacity building, and crisis response. So in this particular project, micro project within this Termen project, I asked the question, what was the reception of the peace program, goals, procedures, the impact by grantees from Armenia and Azerbaijan, the critical perspective, and I tried to answer this question by conducting interviews mainly, and the interviewees were, well, I wouldn't say I started with the context talks with EU delegations in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Actually, I think even before with Euro-Asia Partnership Foundation in Armenia, that was very helpful. And then a delegation of the EU in both, firstly Yerevan and then Baku. But EPF in Armenia was very helpful, very supportive of this project, and thanks to them, I managed to conduct 16 interviews with grantees of 15 projects, various projects. While in Azerbaijan, I struggled a bit because the context was really different, so I didn't get the list of interviewees. I received the list of 3 interviewees. One of them didn't like this Termen project, so yes. So there was a fight to be able to complete the list of interviewees, but potential interviewees, but I even now, I don't really know how many grantees are there because I never received the information how many projects were implemented. And there were additional sources of information, so mainly documents. So as the program addressing the Dialogue for Peace changed into response to crises in Armenia, so there was no standardization of questionnaires, like not complete standardization, because I had to change the questionnaire for Armenia as the projects had different goal. So, well, some notes about struggling to respond to the context, changing context. So what are the elements of the context? What were the changes? So the context that impacts the research, and my position as a researcher, where there maybe will not be comparability of data, the context as it changes, it really puts under question the comparability of situations. So actually you've got the same questionnaire, but ongoing situation with deepening of the conflict, with another crisis changes. So there is the doubt about, you have to all the time to refer to the context to draw conclusions. You have to bring in the context in the explanation of data, because you can't make the data completely comparative in the situation when the context changed. So the questionnaire is the same, but the situation is already different. It was really, really hard. So now I wouldn't really share many like that. I wouldn't really go in depth into results, just telling you what were the challenges of this project, and I will continue with the next project. So situation between wars is obviously the difficult situation. You don't know when the new crisis will erupt, when the situation will change. So you don't know, you are constantly under time pressure, but also you have to be empathetic to people who don't want to speak with you because they've been traumatized, and because of the war, and still after 2 years after the war, they still feel the trauma. So you don't really know how to position yourself in the situation, right? Well, in Azerbaijan, the situation, as I said, was completely different. So it wasn't also only about the. So you, as a researcher, was challenged not only by the fact that it was really hard to get the list of your interviewees, but also the freedom of expression is limited. So those people are under threat. So they don't really, they may feel insecure when responding to your questions. You want to assure them that, but then you have to think how to guarantee the security, right? But also repeatedly I heard from also Armenian colleagues that they suffer from they've got the feeling that the activity Dialogue for Peace met with criticism, heavy criticism after 2020 from their fellow citizens. So we also have to take it into consideration, and that was also real suffering, I would say, because you not only try to do something to, your work is already hard and you don't know how to go, how to proceed, so what to do, because the impact will not be broad, and then you don't really meet with, say, appreciation what you are doing. So I think it's really hard. And the international situation also was changing. So war in Ukraine changed it a lot, and especially in Armenia, I heard a lot about the war in Ukraine, not only about as a context, because the presence of Russia was weaker, and but also as in the comparison between the situation of the conflicts Russia, Ukraine, and Armenia, Azerbaijan, that there hasn't been that much presence of the conflict in international media. There was not a position taken by the international organization in the same way as in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And finally, there was the changing situation of, there was this continuity of communication between previously partners from Armenia and Azerbaijan. So even though the projects were facing or fighting the prejudices in both societies, I had the feeling that maybe this connection makes already something, has got the impact on the people in Armenia, the activists on both sides of the border. They already imagine things rather than base the things on the facts. So it was harder for them to verify certain things. They just were dependent more on the the communication they received from other sources, maybe, or maybe also from their own media. Maybe it changed completely. You don't really have the... So, So when I was conducting already this challenging project that I hope to be practical. So the first, maybe I should add just that the first project that I once... while I was conducting it, I contacted the EU and I asked, because it sounds like the evaluation, I asked them whether they ever received the evaluation. I never received the result of the evaluation of Dialogue for Peace program. And so they were open to receive some comments from grantees. So I hope that it might be somehow practical. Yeah, okay. So, but when I was conducting the second, when the interviews were coming to the end in Azerbaijan, I knew that I would have to, I was already, while speaking with my interviewees, we were thinking about what could be the next step for maybe a practical project that could follow. And we came up with this project that aimed at reconstructing the use of dialogue in public speeches by Azerbaijani government, referring to planned infrastructural changes in Nagorno-Karabakh, and the plan that had practical consequences for Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh. So these, what you see were the questions that are, well, that have to be reframed now. They are not really, well, the situation completely changed. Even being here, we were observing, receiving data that Armenians are leaving Karabakh, right? Nagorno-Karabakh. So we have to definitely reframe those. So these are hanging questions. We have to, as the team, really give it, well, we have to reframe it, and I would like to ask for your help. What makes sense? What and how to make it practical? What could be practical? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Just to say, so from the very beginning of this project, Rosanna and I were really keen that there would be like a gender element or dimension to this. So this is our attempt to do that. Particularly, we know that gender and constructions of femininity, masculinity, are key threads in the construction of nationalist and often very antagonistic discourses. And memory obviously plays such a key role in that as well. What we also see is how gender is very central to this very cosmopolitan project at the international level, particularly, you know, the notions that women's rights are human rights, which has very much been a part of the international agenda since the 1990s. So we've put a gendered lens on this to look at the constructions of nationalism at the local level, but we are trying to also look at what is happening at the international level. So we are trying to do this through the case study of women, peace and security, which is a UN agenda. So it occurs at the international level, but it's implemented at the local level. So it's a really interesting opportunity to look at this dynamic about how the local interacts with the international. So more about women, peace and security, or it's also known as WPS, shorthand, in a moment. But I just wanted to touch on what's happening or how the national is understood in terms of the interaction with gender, memory and nation building. And there's this long established literature around how traditionally within these antagonistic constructions of masculinity and femininity, you get that masculine notions of men are protectors and defenders of the nation, whereas feminine or women are the carers and reproducers. So very much putting women into that private space and men within the public space of protecting the nation and representing the nation. However, what we have seen in the last couple of decades is this emergence of what's been referred to as a backlash against the so-called gender ideology. So what we're kind of seeing is there's case studies across the world of this, where at a nation-state level, there's this kind of resistance to what's seen as an imposition from international organisations of this is how you do gender equality. You need to implement these gender mainstream policies to look more like a democracy. So it's particularly seen that, you know, organisations like the EU, for example, and the UN are like imposing these kind of values and beliefs from a very top-down way. And at a national level, we're seeing a lot of resistance to this. So this backlash against gender ideology comes across in many ways that we've seen. Rollbacks to reproductive rights for women, resistance to the Istanbul Convention, which is a European convention against domestic violence, as well as restricting space for LGBTQ communities. So what we see within this is how memory and identity and the recent past is very much brought up within these anti-gender discourses. So this is a quote from a bishop in Poland who said that gender ideology is worse than communism and Nazism put together. I think what's really crucial about this isn't just about gender. It's not a reaction just against women and women's rights or at the LGBT community, but it's also like an empty signifier. So within this, it carries opposition towards what is seen as principles or policies or values that are being imposed from above by these international liberal, often Western institutions. And that is coming up against national values. But the puzzle that we're trying to unpick is in examples or case studies where you see this, and for this we're using Poland and Armenia, and we see these discourses in both those examples. We are trying to unpick this riddle, which is, okay, well, where you see these anti-gender movements and discourses, you also see this engagement with human rights, cosmopolitan discourse, and the liberal international system. So what is happening there? And yeah, it's an interesting thing to unpick. So we're doing this through what is referred to as the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, or WPS. So there's like a symbol on the right-hand side, which is 1325. So it's often referred to this whole agenda as 1325 because that was the first UN security resolution. And crucially, it was thought, so this was the first attempt to look at the gender-specific impacts of conflict and women and girls. So the impact of conflict, but also how you can integrate women into post-conflict negotiations and politics after conflict. This is seen as very much being shaped by gender cosmopolitanism, which has also been described as feminism across borders. And for some, it's this kind of gap between global objectives through these kind of policies and what's happening at a local level, that it allows these kind of anti-gender movements to emerge. So I think just what's important to mention as well, so this is very much the context that 1325 or WPS was brought up in. You had the conflicts in Rwanda and Bosnia, and it was thought, okay, we need to protect women in conflict, but we also need to get women at the negotiating table. So 1325 or WPS is this, you can't really see it behind me, this is all of these UN Security Council resolutions, so they've passed a lot more since the first one in 2000. But crucially in 2005, what's called the first National Action Plan, or the NAP, was developed, and this was the first time that this international institution was reinterpreted to be implemented at a local state level. So I think Denmark was the first country to implement a NAP, and now you have 107 countries that have national action plans, and also international organisations have to create national action plans. So the EU, NATO, African Union all have national action plans too. And this is our focus here. So we have one Polish national action plan from 2018, and we now have two from Armenia that we can look at as well. Okay, so this, although WPS by a lot of feminist scholars is seen as being positive and a key stepping stone, there is a lot of critique towards it as well, particularly about it being like a colonial imposition of the global north, placing values about peace building and democracy in the global south. But more recently, there's been feminist scholars that have called to look at what they refer to as like the post-Soviet space, or that space that's been overlooked. So this is kind of also what we're trying to look at here. Is criticised for being very protectionist and not giving women agency, so looking at women as victims. And also in terms of implementation, we'll come on to that in a moment, but it has a lack of goals and clear monitoring as well. So these are the two case studies that we're looking at. I can talk about this for ages, but it's quite interesting that in Poland, the NAP was introduced under the right-wing conservative PiS government. The Polish NAP has an external focus, which is quite normal for more kind of European countries. And we're also looking at Armenia, which has two NAPs. The first was introduced following the Velvet Revolution, and this tends to have more of an internal focus as well. So we'll talk about that in time. So we did content analysis of the NAPs, but we also did interviews with civil society, civil servants. Some of the people that we spoke to were those that actually wrote the NAP and were involved in it, or they were involved in previous processes of writing the NAP and were annoyed that they weren't involved in the final processes. So yeah, we got a rich kind of understanding, and these were the questions that we were trying to look at. I think it's also important to say, so yeah, how is it implemented at a local level? How is gender equality and conflict actually framed in these processes, and crucially, how does the NAP successfully address conflict itself, right? So we, at the start of this, it was like, 2019, early 2020, before the war in Ukraine and before 2020 Violence in Arts Act kicked off. So we now had to think about this in a way, well, actually, are these policies used? Are they practical documents that can be implemented? Which is a key question, obviously. Right, so this is the Polish NAP, and it's quite bright, it's interesting, it's got lots of pictures, it's, it's far more engaging than some of them, I guess. But so it's very well designed, shall we say. So it's from 2018 to 2021. So the first question that we wanted to look at was, how is that kind of international values, how are they implemented at a local level? And what we see is how it's presented in the Polish NAP is that there's historical continuity of women supporting and fighting the nation, so for the nation. So this NAP is nothing new. We've been doing this all along, and now we're just writing a policy document in order to reflect what we've been doing this whole time. The NAP itself is very nostalgic. Like, there's a lot of discussion at the very beginning about the history. It's got a lot of black and white photos, and this is more so than like a lot of most of the other national action plans that we see in other countries as well. So this is very much tied to kind of the 100th anniversary as well of Poland regaining independence. So it talks about like the role of women in World War I and World War II, and again, the role that these Polish women played in these very key struggles for the Polish nation. What is really interesting is like how this is wrapped up and presented in very cosmopolitan language around equality, international human rights, and collaboration with the international system. It very much talks about like gender. It talks about equality between men and women, so it doesn't really deconstruct. We don't have a we don't have an intersectional understanding of like what gender equality is, and this is, I guess, a very safe way of presenting this continuation of equality between men and women. Secondly, the NAP is very externally focused. It's something that happens, conflict is something that happens elsewhere. We don't have these issues. So, for example, women coming to Poland, we don't need to think about refugees and the rights of women in Poland. We need to think about that elsewhere. Conflict doesn't happen within our borders. It focuses on gender-based sexual violence, so it's very much a protectionist framing. And it kind of fits within the contemporary government agenda. So the second point and a key focus of the NAP is how can we increase the number of women in the military. So it's a relatively safe topic that doesn't necessarily go against what the current strategy of the day is. I think what's really important for this as well is that the drivers for the NAP came from an international level. There wasn't much collaboration, shall we say, with civil society, people, grassroots organisations in terms of writing the NAP. What we heard is that the NAP was there because they were told by NATO that they had to have a NAP, and we were also told that so this coincides also with Poland taking up a seat, the non-permanent seat at the UN, and it was deemed that they couldn't do that without a national action plan. So all the drivers are very much coming from the international level, which goes some way to say why it was a stage for a Polish brand on the international level, rather than seen as a bottom-up document. And that also affects the localization and implementation of it as well, because there was a real lack of consultation with civil society, which the National Action Plan is supposed to be all about. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to put out consultations, and it's supposed to engage with those that it's covering and talking about, and also it's got very weak monitoring mechanisms. There's no budget, there's no targets, and this was described to us by interviewees as it's very minimal, it's skimpy, it's protective, and it's not ambitious so that they don't therefore get accused of not missing those targets. So it feels like, you know, it's a very shiny, interesting document, but when you drill down, it's really lacking anything. And it uses that language of cosmopolitanism, but it very much speaks to an international agenda without much practical use.
So, okay, I will go faster. Like, this is how Armenian tune-ups, like in design, look like. As you see, they are not as that much fancy as Polish one. So, just to try to transfer this message, what this overall WPS convention is, resolution is, it's based on some pillars, and national action plans are usually taking those pillars and creating their national policies above those pillars. And Armenian national action plans are designed again on those pillars of participation, protection, prevention, relief and recovery, and I have listed here as they are listed in Armenian National Action Plan. For me, it is strange, like putting prevention on the third place, while it should be like the first place to prevent. Later, if you are not able to prevent, going to protect or participate. Like, and the second Armenian National Plan went beyond all this international resolution and added the new pillar like of cooperation, which is not existing in the international agenda. Like they feel that it's something important to add above all that which already formulated by UN. I will take the same approach as for Polish case to see how these international documents are translating into local context, and the Armenian national action plans, they are still seeing presenting the broader scope of gender equality. They are although trying to domesticate it by making references to historical memory in the Armenian identity, such as heavily mentions of deportation of ethnic Armenians from settlements in Azerbaijan. I am presenting here the exact quotes, not my interpretation, like during these all waves. And also domesticating by addressing Armenians' role and commitment to preventing genocide and atrocities worldwide, and underscoring Armenia's dedication to contribution to a safer and more just global community. And the most surprising one, like ensuring, while mentioning all these local context, and then suddenly involve some community programs and decision making on climate change mitigation, which is like not was there at all and not any mention, but as this was some trend for UN resolution to address climate change, it means that the next national document which should address the international resolution, it perceived to bring those terms even without seeing that artificial disconnection, without the context and the new improvements. How these Armenian national action plans were addressing gender in conflict and peace building, like they see Karabakh conflict as the foundation and core of the document, and role of the woman in all cycles of conflict, and portraying them as the victims and who need protection as a result of the conflict. These documents need to address women who were displaced as a consequence of the war aggression against Artsakh in autumn 2020. Additionally, it also considers the security concerns of women and girls in the border regions of Armenia, beyond like Artsakh displaced people, and also addressing the issues like that national action plan should promote women's participation in the armed force, police, national defense system. But mainly trying to address like social and economic rights who have been displaced and resettled in Armenia, but overlooking the problems that may rise for women as a result of war, such as gender violences, sex violences, like abortion issues, rapes, these kind of things, which usually connected with war aggression. And it has very like cautious approach toward using the term peace, because it's the second major term in the title, women, peace and security. And UN resolution is highlighting the terms of peace in terms that women should take part in decision making and bring peace more closer, like appreciating women's roles in peace negotiations. But in Armenian national action plans, that word peace, I counted, appeared 8 times, many times connected just with the title, and one time just when they have to produce and publish some booklets over that, again, resolution. It make no sense to be connected with the real essence of UN ideas, women as participants of the peace. And yes, mostly by formulating in this way, it should perceive as a safe hub to protect the government interest by meeting international obligations, like artificially, while tactically supporting conservative discourse, creating no problems at the local level. And as you have seen the design, it always has some text of introduction, and this is like wishful approach of the describing the things, how they should be done or look like. But when they need to like present the ways how the program should achieve that wishful aims, it's lacking of feasibility and funding, because there is no state funding for no sure funding for any activity. All the activities is supposed to be funded by international organizations, donors, or by cooperation. So it's not feasible if they will be funded, or if not, what will happen. And yes, some concluding thoughts that these national action plans utilize cosmopolitan language of equality and human rights. Agenda is safe, like discussion of women in military and women in need of protection, and making war safe for women, just normalizing militarist practices, not targeting the issue of war itself. And in implementation, these national action plans serve as a tick box exercise and do not provide transformative potential in the context of conflict. When I was doing this research, trying to keep myself to continue to read all these tables, formulas, and sheets, trying to achieve at least that there is a single case when they have been used. At least now, when there is a momentum to using these kind of documents, because it's around conflict and it's around displacement, it's around women, again, as if they want to see us victims. But no single attempt to use this document, to refer to this document as something important, neither from the UN, neither for the local context, neither for the organizations who were doing their activities connected with that platform. And usually when we were speaking with the people who were doing projects within that platform, like receiving funding, grants, they were saying that, you know, we are doing our work on the grassroots. So there are times that we need to reframe what we were doing and saying that we are connecting with WPS convention. But when it doesn't work, we are still continuing to do our work. Yeah. And yeah. Some more thoughts about agonism, and like to see UN responsibility to refer and to see this as a real place for potential for making agonistic peace-building strategies. But it is still neglected from above, and grassroots initiatives still have that potential, but as they are not followed from international agenda and by local authorities, they are still going like to work by their own.
Thank you very much. Yeah. We are quite on time, I guess, and now we have two participants.
Sorry, it's a bit of a distance in the southern hemisphere at the moment, so takes some time to get there.
It's there, Ali. So
Okay, all right, I'll start. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be there. My presentation, as the title here suggests, is at a different scale. It kind of indirectly pertains to the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia by looking at a larger scale between the two supporters, Iran and Turkey, but also from the sphere of cultural heritage. In the paper or in the presentation, we're using two well-known examples of Nowruz and Rumi, which are both intangible, to explore the use of heritage in geostrategic competitions between Iran and Turkey. Our point is twofold. First, that heritage is a vehicle for soft power and implicated in abrasive geostrategic competitions with territorial implications between rising regional powers. Remember that heritage is a bone of contention even in smaller places between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and it has territorial corollaries. Second, that there is a continuum between domestic and international identity formations and politics, and heritage is a key factor in that continuum. Put simply, that means that when you construct heritage internally, it has international dimensions as well, and vice versa. Heritage thus attains, as I said, a dual significance as being central to nation-building projects, as well as serving as a carrier of symbolic content. And this includes core national values in circulation in international arenas. In the end of the paper or presentation, I will offer a couple of remarks reflecting on agonism and its relationship to heritage at an international scale, which is, in fact, heritage diplomacy. Our approach is informed, firstly, by geoculture, which is defined as a cultural structure that is disclosed through symbolic interactions across geographic space and on multiple scales. It suggests, on the one hand, that identity politics has geoeconomic and geopolitical implications, and on the other hand, that domestic power and legitimation are complemented by international power projections and identity politics. Shared cultural traditions thus perform symbolic functions as representations of a common set of cultural values. Secondly, it is framed as heritage diplomacy, which we define as the active use of forms of natural and cultural heritage in advancing geocultural, geopolitical, or geoeconomic objectives in collaboration or competition with other countries. By this, I'm trying to say that heritage or the references to the past have actual geopolitical and economic corollaries on the ground, and they participate in competitions. Finally, there's soft power as the ability to co-opt other countries into an agenda by affecting and attracting them through culture, values, foreign policy, and history. You just need to think of genes, the blues music, or cinema or Hollywood to recognize what I'm saying. These attractions are manifested through things such as national days, cultural events, and significant historical figures that promote cohesion internally within the nation and project prestige and distinction on the world stage. In other words, history is remembered and reinvented in the form of heritage to do work in and for the present. Soft power is the desired effect, while heritage diplomacy provides the operational framework for its realization. In reflecting on Iran-Turkey relationship, we should bear in mind that it is affected by their long historical competition since the 16th century. After 1979, which is the date of the Iranian Revolution, Iran and Turkey have maintained a close relationship, but have also competed over regional influence and leadership. In fact, we could observe that a mixture of competition, occasional cooperation, and confrontation has characterized the history of the two countries. Under Erdogan, Turkey, in a neo-Ottoman vein, as you can see over there, has tried to influence former Ottoman territories and emphasize Turkishness as a distinct civilizational designator. You see the effects of it in South Caucasus at the moment, causing detractors, including Iranians, to refer to this as a delusion and a distraction from Turkey's domestic economic problems. Sources of contention between Iran and Turkey include concerns over Turkey's promotion of separatism amongst Iran's Azerbaijani population, concerns about Turkey's strategic relationship with the West, and its growing links with and Turkey's membership in the NATO. Culture is another significant area of competition between Iran and Turkey. Both countries use culture and heritage as a platform for expanding their soft power, especially in the Caucasus, via cultural institutions they establish. The competition between Iran and Turkey is both civilizational and territorial. It is therefore geocultural, especially in the South Caucasus, which I referred to, where Turkey has promoted a pan-Turkic agenda relying chiefly on the Republic of Azerbaijan, whose relationship with Iran has become increasingly contentious. Now, just two keywords here that count. One is Turkluk, and the other one is Azerbaijanchilik. And there is a kind of a stasis between these two. At the moment, Turkluk, which is what Turkey promotes, which means being Turkish, is taking the upper hand. I will show how heritage works by focusing on two particular cases of Rumi the poet and claims of a Nowruz being a Persian New Year. Now let's move on to Rumi. Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi Balkhi, that's his name, the 13th century poet, and he was a Persian poet and theologian and mystic. He was born in Balkh, which is somewhere in Afghanistan, present day, and migrated through Iran to the west, settling in Konya, present-day Turkey. The Sufi order Mevleviye was founded after him, and his residence is today the Mevlana Museum. Rumi has multiple connotations, and he's a Sufi master, a literary figure, and spiritual father for both the Ottomans and modern Turkey. This is according to their own sayings, both under Ataturk and under Erdogan even. And importantly, he is a commodified assemblage of heritage and tourism elements. I'll explain in a moment, but what I'm trying to suggest is that he's a touristic icon as well. He's also the object of multiple rival claims, one of which I will mention here. In 2016, Iran's intention to register his major literary work, which is in Persian, on the Memory of the World program, which is a program dedicated to registering texts, textual artifacts, if you like, was met with Turkish objection. And this forced an official statement on the part of Iran, clarifying that even though we may want to register it, it's not a claim on Rumi's nationality. You can see how the imaginations of the present are back projected onto the past. Ultimately, the proposal went through jointly between Iran and Turkey in 2019, excluding and angering Afghanistan, which happens to be the birthplace. So you can see that the most peaceful elements of heritage seem to raise quite a few abrasive concerns across multiple national territories. Turkey uses images of Rumi and whirling dervishes to enhance its prestige and maintains this imagery as a key soft power resource. Domestically, tourism plays a significant role, making Konya, the place that I showed, and the Mevlana Museum a key space for heritage diplomacy. and Turkish state-affiliated institutions, rather, scholars and policymakers highlight the Turkish personality of Rumi. So it's about who he belongs to at the present. So there's a bone of contention here. And by the way, you can buy your own mic for only $18.06 Australian. That's very affordable. I suggest you do that. Anyway, Tehran, in reaction to that, initially reacted badly. For example, Iran's Cultural Heritage and Tourism Organization convened an international seminar to introduce Rumi to the world as an Iranian, while Iran's Saadi Foundation, which is a foundation for teaching Persian across the world to different nations, promoted Iranian culture through initiatives such as Fomer, and you can see up there, and it's about teaching to the Turks, to the Turkish-speaking people, the Persian language. The foundation head highlighted the importance of the Persian language, which has been influential and widespread in the Ottoman Empire. That happens to be a historic fact. In reference to Rumi's popularity. So the argument is that, well, we know you Turks like him and everybody likes him. You know why you like him? Because he was Persian. So that's essentially the nub of the argument. Turkey and Iran also compete over Rumi's heritage in the Balkan region, so in Europe, particularly in Bosnia. The Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, which is called TICA, carried out restoration projects to maintain Masnavi reading tradition, Masnavi again being his major work. So there's a tradition of reading this, which is both a Sufi tradition, a spiritual thing, and a literary tradition across multiple regions. The Mevlevi Lodge in Sarajevo serves as a Balkans Mevlana Research Center and hosts artistic and cultural events to keep Rumi's heritage alive. Iran has made significant investments in conducting cultural activities relevant to Rumi's heritage, such as a ceremony on the commemoration day of Rumi, upholding him as a transnational figure of amity while highlighting his Persian character. So I'm sure we can see the contention here. He's a transnational figure, but it's also Persian, from the Persians' view, if you like. In Central and South Asia, also, Turkey uses the figure of Rumi to increase its soft power. In Afghanistan, Turkey opened several Turkish schools and granted Afghan students, especially those with Uzbek ethnicity, Uzbeks are a Turkic group in there, scholarship to undertake their tertiary education in Turkey. That's soft power, by the way. While promoting Turkish language in Afghanistan, TICA also committed to the restoration of Rumi's home in the city of Balkh, his birthplace, and transforming it into a Rumi cultural center, which was meant to include a lodge and a museum. The Afghan government, when there was one, this is before Taliban, of course, was interested more in collaborating with Turkey than with Iran, despite being of the same language between the two countries, when it came to registering Rumi and his heritage internationally. And by the way, the lodge was never built ultimately. Iran has been absent from projects launched by Turkey and has experienced little success using Rumi to enhance its soft power in Afghanistan. Afghans argued that Masnavi should be considered common heritage of Afghanistan and Turkey, basically skipping over Iran, because of Rumi's places of birth and death. Now let's turn to what is known as Nowruz. Nowruz is a very ancient Persian New Year. It happens on the vernal at the exact moment of vernal equinox, so it's usually around the 21st of March, and it has ancient calendrical and religious significance for Persianate societies, and it comes from Zoroastrianism and the rest of it. So it has had vicissitudes throughout its history, but especially in recent times, and it's had a shifting political appeal after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which was the Islamic Revolution. Nowruz has been traced back to the ancient times, as I mentioned. After 1979, the state attempted to downplay Nowruz, as it did with every other pre-Islamic tradition, but currently it uses Nowruz to further its soft power in various ways. In noting its significance, it suffices to say that in 2016, on Azerbaijani initiative, it was, and Azerbaijanis do also celebrate it, because you might recall that Azerbaijan until 1820s or thereabouts, what is now parts of Azerbaijan used to be parts of Iran. So anyway, it was jointly inscribed by 12 countries, including Iran and Turkey, on the representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Now we have to look at how it works inside Turkey. So in terms of disputations and politics internally. In Turkey, Nowruz has had a different trajectory, which clearly demonstrates the continuity between domestic and international identity politics. In the course of a century, this popular heritage has been transformed into a contested political arena where conflicting nationalisms meet. Despite its Persian origins, Nowruz was celebrated in the Ottoman period, and as early as 1444, it marked both the start of the new year and the beginning of the financial year for the Ottomans. Early in the 20th century, and with the formation of modern Turkey.
Ali,
Yep.
can you,
Yep.
you have 5 minutes to go. Okay.
That's okay. I'm almost there. Nowruz was reconceived in a Turkish context. At the dawn of World War I, Nowruz appeared in public discourse in Turkey in the service of nationalism. From 1919, Kurdish activists and intellectuals began gradually to construct a repertoire of symbols of identity to counter the denial of Kurdish identity by the Turks. Borrowing from Iran and following their Iraqi brethren, they incorporated Nowruz and a mythic Persian hero, Kaveh, and their activism ultimately led to the suppression of the movement and its associated symbols, including Nowruz, which was removed from the Turkish official calendar. By the 1980s, Nowruz and Kaveh were once again co-opted for mass mobilization by the PKK, the Party of Workers of Kurdistan. The coup of 1980 once again suppressed Kurdish movements, and so it goes. Subsequently, using Turkish nationalist scholarship that traced the origins of Nowruz to an ancient Turkic celebration coming from Northeastern Asia, the state made it an official celebration in 1995. Thus, both the state and its Kurdish opponents have been inventing traditions with transnational corollaries, and each claiming and excluding the other in the process towards pan-Turkic and pan-Kurdish ideologies. By the end of 1992 and the collapse of USSR, Iran and Turkey sought to expand their influence in the former Soviet territories through culture and religion. Some republics are ethno-linguistically Turkic, but also belong to the other country, Iran, in terms of culture, belong in the sphere, not belong to the country. And Özal, for example, the president of Turkey, called for the formation of a new world order centered on the Turkic countries. He emphasized the importance of incorporating Nowruz, this celebration, as part of it, so it becomes a transnational factor. Indeed, Turkey pushed for 21st of March to be recognized by the United Nations as International Nowruz Day, and it has been pushing for its celebration henceforth. Iran reacts against the Turkish appropriation of Nowruz and its claims, and suggests that it has Turkish, Iranian rather, roots, and it tries to make felicitations to other countries with little success. Now, to conclude, okay, here we are. We can see Iran and Turkey both utilize Nowruz and Rumi as part of their heritage diplomacy. We can see that heritage is at the heart of regional territorial competitions. And this form of soft power projection through heritage diplomacy is essential in that regional competition. It can serve, that is, heritage can serve as a contact zone for intercultural dialogue, but it often turns into a zone of friction. Turkey, in particular, has been effective in using heritage, even the heritage that it invents and reimagines, sometimes fictitiously as its own, but Iran has totally failed on that ground. Finally, and this also relates to the conference, we should ask, is it possible to take an agonistic approach in contexts such as this in West Asia or between Iran and Turkey? As I have implied here, invented heritage takes an exclusive rather than ameliorative tone sometimes, and thus it cultivates potential violence. International peace is only maintained by a rules-based order. In other words, agonism only makes sense where there are important guarantees and guarantors for security mechanisms in place. This also points to the significance of the nation state, which as scholars, we seem to dedicate more time to critiquing rather than understanding its function. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Ali. Please stay there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be having a QA session shortly. But
Sure.
now we have another participant, should be there. Ardak, do we have him? Have that online? No, we don't have? Okay. So, okay, then the session comes to an end, and finally, so we'll go for then the question answer session, and I'll request Dr. Anna and Sophie and Rosanna, please come here. And I want to start with Dr. Anna's presentation. Once again, the question she asked, she may, so that she may get some response. So can we have that? Can we have Anna's presentation? Yeah, especially the last line, yeah? Okay, so one before the last.
So research questions. I mean, if I may just add quickly,
Yep.
that I know what we may analyze, what kind of data we can collect, like how to make it practical and where to put the focus. That's the different. What should be the sources of our information mainly, because we also have a limited scope of both time and money. Yes. Thank you. Yes. So I mean, we know that we still in this changed situation that where and when the community, like Armenian community, is almost not there in Nagorno-Karabakh. We can still conduct the study, but the question is about the focus. So we can actually ask the question how it has been possible that it happened, like this violent solution adopted by Azerbaijan, while in parallel there were peace talks, right? And what kind of consequences it had, what kind of, the process was behind, etc. But okay, no more talk from me. I'm really curious what you think, what is valuable.
Yeah. So, yeah, please. Yeah.
Yes, so thank you for all these presentations, which were very relevant to one of our work package in particular. And I kind of would like to have your thoughts about how much international organizations could be actually promoters of an agonistic approach or agonistic approaches, and be partners and supporters of such approaches, which doesn't seem to be the case too much often. And somehow there is this kind of colonial tendency where they seek to impose their own image as being the promoters of human rights or women's rights. But we know that very often this is as you see. As you have shown, it can be quite disconnected from the what people really need, and from there's a top-down imposition of values instead of listening to bottom-up needs. So can we somehow change this approach, or is there any chance or any tendency or any sign of more supportive approach to agonism? And maybe can. That was also before we had this conference, we had this meeting with the team leaders or team coordinators of this project where we discussed about final reporting, and maybe our report can then actually have some sort of, we are supposed to author a policy recommendation, which could be maybe a way of promoting or suggesting some approach. So any suggestions for that?
So, did you ask it from
I asked this to Anna and Sophie and Rosanna.
Thank you for presentation. I have two questions. For one for Anna and the other for Dr. Musafari. Anna said that she was involved in the infrastructure project, yeah? Or you would like to involve that. And my question is following, how about methodology and methodological challenges about that? Because if you're involved about Nagorno-Karabakh region, it's the paramilitary or military zone, and some airport military, etc., etc. How you will be research on that if you have left don't accesses about, and also high political symbolic actions infrastructure like prison in Agdam region, who was like Aliyev intention as a concentration camps for Armenian men, for filtration camps. It's one of the infrastructural projects initiated by Azerbaijani government. And in this context, what do you think about methodological? Because I think the access will be limited, etc., etc. And the other question for Dr. Musafari, thank you for interesting presentation. And I would like learn Turkish direct involvement. You have any data in territory of Azerbaijan against Iranian cultural heritage, like conversion, Shia mosque to Sunni, etc., etc., or the other cases? I think competition in territory of Azerbaijan.
Sure.
I'm going to ask a question too. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful presentations. Okay.
Yeah, for the technical.
Should I say that?
No. Yeah, you can say that. You can say that.
So people know online. We're going to take a break for 2 minutes for technical reasons, okay?
What's happening?
Taking a break
I
for
can't see.
2 minutes for technical reasons, Ali. There'll be a technical break, okay?
Okay. That's all right. Okay.
Ali, no, the break is over, Ali. It was shorter than...
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah, it was
Okay,
shorter than expected.
okay. Whenever it's my turn to answer, please just call me out and I'll answer.
Thank you for being so patient. I've actually got a question for Sophie and Rosanna about these naps, basically. Yeah, it's so interesting. But I was just thinking in the context, I think Sophie said there were 107 naps. And I just wonder if any of them are actually being implemented, or if it's just window dressing. If this, I was interested about that. If you've got any concrete examples of actual work being done.
So, yeah, David.
Sorry, this isn't one of those times when people say this isn't really a question, but I'm just going to come back to Anna's dilemma because I think we probably have to address that. Just sort of anecdotally, talking to a lot of cultural practitioners in Armenia who had been in receipt of not just money from the project that you're talking about, but from lots of overseas funders, basically, to do cultural work that's peace-focused. I did a lot of those interviews with Nina, and we quite often came away, feeling quite depressed because you were sort of talking to people who, are committed to peace, but also have particular art forms they're trying to pursue, whether that's kind of visual art or theatre or whatever it is. So they're committed to that kind of cultural practice. But that takes place in a context in which there isn't a lot of money around to do that. They're not doing the kind of art which is sort of commercially viable. And they're working in countries where the sort of the funding from the state, their own state, isn't necessarily significant. So I don't know where this is going, but something to be explored there about the kind of the agency of those practitioners, because they find themselves caught in this dilemma, I think, which is familiar from other contexts with cultural policy, but is very sharp, I think, at least in the Armenian case, where you know, the money is there to carry on doing your art if you focus on particular areas, particular topics, because international funders are kind of, you know, positioning you to take up that money, and yet you feel a sense personally of the kind of futility of that, and there's kind of not really a way out of that dilemma. And I wonder if that is a way methodologically into your problem of thinking about the sort of the subjectivity, the agency and the positionality of those cultural practitioners in that institutional context, which you've probably already thought of, but I'm just going to throw that in there.
Anything? No? Okay. Do we have any other question here? Any other comment, question? So otherwise we go with Rosanna.
For Anna, like you were telling that you have also challenges to reach the people who were working with that project's grants within Azerbaijan, and although I have my own explanation for that, but just wondering, what do you think, what was the reason? Because in Armenia, it would be more expectable, like when people will refuse because they somehow see how it fails, like, but what was your understanding of the situation in Azerbaijan? Why people like having that position to become members of that project and later somehow trying to hide or escape from that responsibility also?
So no more questions. So should I ask you guys to respond? And then we'll go to Relly. Yeah. Okay.
All of them? Yeah. Okay. Well, the question about the impact or intervention from the international organizations through certain programs, there is plurality of programs, and I haven't researched all of them. There is actually a person doing her PhD in Armenia who has researched that many programs of international organizations. So I will ask her whether her work is ready, and maybe she would be willing to share with us the results, because my research is very fragmentary, but still. Well, the outcomes after interviews of the agency of this kind of actions, that's the link to David's question, that like the outcome is mixed. So in Azerbaijan, I think that the main goal of those projects, or there's two goals actually going in parallel. The first is to create, and the goal of single projects like there's a similar to increase the capacity for critical thinking among young people and fact-checking skills, and also to create parallel channels of communication to those, to propaganda, etc., etc. And when it comes to the subject, it includes the subject of the conflict of a border, the image of the other being Armenian, etc. So I think that in this sense, those people still think that even the money from the EU for this kind of project, it still makes sense, because you never know from how little, well, there is hope for the change, of course, the more general structural change, they don't know whether it will come, when it may happen. After 2014, after the change of the law, the situation of NGOs is even tougher. So it's really, really hard but they continue their work, because there has to be someone who does this kind of work, it's not a big space, but that's alternative public sphere. And this alternative public sphere has to be there. I don't know, I'm not that competent, but so the larger it is, the better it is, but yeah. So agency, I think that especially in Armenia, well, that I think it may change, because after the victory, you feel differently about your own impact on the contribution to the victory, and when you are on the losing end, when your country lost, and there's obvious losses on the side of Armenia, like territorial, right? So you start. I think it's quite visible. You start thinking about your own. You believe in what you are doing, in your actions. Dialogue for peace, like that, fit into this stream, but. At the same time, you've got doubts, you receive critical comments, you think about you and your country, your identity, national identity, how an identity as a citizen who should defend the peace on the one side, on the other side you've got your national identity that is in conflict with this identity. So I suppose it's really, really tough. I don't want to develop on that. I still, yeah. So Rosanna, I use the snowball effect as the way to circumvent or to be able to collect voices, to include voices of people from NGOs in Azerbaijan who had their projects financed by the EU, because I couldn't get this information from other sources like EPF, Euro-Asia Partnership Foundation. Azerbaijan was not that as supportive, and for understandable reasons, probably. Because they had to bear consequences of certain kind of openness 2 years before. The head of this Azerbaijani EPF faced criminal case opened after the publication of a journalist being. I mean, it's really, really hard, but snowball effect result, you have to build the trust between you and those people, and once they, I was, I appreciate the willingness to share with me, and that's the way I got to, that's the context to 10 people, because some people were linking me with other, etc. The effect. So I don't know whether it's satisfactory answer to your question. They fear for their safety. And the law changed. They have to report their activities to the government anyway.
So on Christina's question about international organisations, can they promote agonism? I personally find that quite hard to conceive. I mean, there are projects at the local level, I guess, going on where they can foster certain aspects. But what I have found really helpful is that within the peace and conflict literature, there is more discussion about agonistic peace building. And I always find that sometimes like the memory study stuff and the peace and conflict stuff uses really similar language, but they don't always talk to each other. And I think marrying those two together has been really helpful for me personally, but maybe for other people as well. And I think what the peace and conflict literature does, and I guess that's what we're trying to do here as well, is to look at really specific case studies and really understand the social, economic, political context, historical context. And because it is so specific, it's then hard to look at how international organisations can adopt those approaches, because you really have to drill into the very specific cases and really understand them. So, yeah, I'm struggling to see that, unfortunately. But I mean, like this agonistic work is happening, so maybe it's about rephrasing the question and thinking, what can international organisations learn from these grassroots organisations? And then that kind of links to what Nina was asking. Is it all window dressing? So there's 107 NAPs, but a lot of these countries, but there's a lot more NAPs. So some of these countries are on their third or fourth or fifth, sixth NAPs. And people that spoke to us they were very candid, I guess, in saying that, okay, the first NAPs are never transformative, but we realise that that is a start in the right direction. And a lot of these feminist groups, activists would say it's not great. There's so many failings in it, but we still maintain that it is a positive thing to have, and it does have transformative potential. However conservative a lot of the NAPs are, we still hold on the next one or the one after. There's a process of learning and adaptation. So if we want any positives, I guess maybe that's something we can take away. But they all differ so hugely. If anyone is interested, there's a massive database at LSE which compares all the different NAPs. So that work is going on, but they do differ so hugely depending on where the funding's coming from, and what kind of country is writing it. But yeah, good question. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, a little bit, because two main points would be, like, for questions from both of you, funding and involvement. And I see that international organizations see these local NAPs as the only way to keep states connected to those topics. Otherwise, that will be disappear even in the state policy agendas. And although, as Sophie mentioned, those are the less effective when they are starting, but at least the state agencies have to report back what they have done. And I feel that international organizations, as a recommendation, for example, they can follow like closer and more carefully to those reports and feedbacks in order to make meaningful interventions to the local translations of NAPs, and also to see all the three words and terms in the title equally relevant and important, like woman, peace, and security. Not like overlooking one subject because this country is not able to target that because of understandable situation. There should not be any like exception. If the country adopted Women, Peace and Security resolution, it means they have to target all the three terms, parts and ideas equally and in the same way, in putting the same like interest. As for the more than 100 NAPs, I have trying to look at some of them, but yes, really some of them were working in terms of, because the state allocating special funding. It means that when there is money, there is some things also to do and follow if it is done or no. And also there are some states who are not allocating money, but calling for as wider participation as it is possible, thus raising awareness and knowledge around and care and support toward these ideas for women, peace and security agenda. This also can be some achievements of implementation of that local versions of international agenda.
Yeah, so Dr. Arsad, Anna wants to respond to your question.
Sorry, I put that. So basically we think about when it comes to infrastructure, so the situation was like it has been changing, and a colleague of mine, she entered Nagorno-Karabakh, but not to the zone that was controlled by Yeah. Anyway, through the interviews with representatives of authorities, we thought that that's the minimal level that we can ask about plans, analyze documents. So that's the primary source. But of course, you don't see what you want to analyze in the sense, but you analyze it through the sources like that are the ones who like they make the plans, so you actually analyze the information on the plans and the implementation of these plans, but you may not be able to document the infrastructure itself. So that's the way you can analyze it. But now we are thinking whether it's the major thing to analyze, or maybe we should shift the attention to how it's possible that it might have happened that the conflict has been resolved in this way by force. Also including the role of international organizations. I don't know whether Gosia, you would like to add something? No?
So now we should go to Dr. Ali. Ali, you there? Thanks for being there. And so now you can answer like Dr. Arson's question, but you may take one of my comment either. Like your soft heritage, there's debate and the policies the Turkey and Iran has been playing on. You may take it even further to Afghanistan, to Pakistan as well. The Turkey is like winning its case in Pakistan by promoting so many cultural heritage symbols and things there. So please carry on.
Sure. Just before I start, the sound wasn't good. I didn't get the name of our questioner. Can I? Who asked the question of me, please?
Arsen Hakopian from Armenia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arkopian, Arsen, if I may, for your very good question. Look, is Azerbaijan committing heritage destruction towards Iran? Let me step back. We both know that between Azerbaijan and Armenia, there are claims and counterclaims, and there is good evidence that, especially with relation to the Qatars and the rest of it, there have been destruction that has been happening ongoing for a while. But the question is I tend to frame it in this way. There are at least two types of heritage destruction, at least, that we could actually mention here. One is if I actively bulldoze something, and that has happened, one kind of destruction. The other kind, which I may call soft heritage destruction, is when we start misappropriating, mislabeling, changing things, and reinterpreting them in a different way. Now, that kind of if you will, soft destruction happens in many places. It's not unique to, let's say, in this case of your question, to Azerbaijan. But yes, it does happen enormously in relation to Iran. If Armenia looks into, with good reason, to parts of Eastern Turkey as the ancient kind of Western Armenia, that once was and no longer is because of territorial change. Azerbaijan, on the other hand, has this complete, if you will, Soviet invention of history that suggests that there used to be an Azerbaijan. Through machinations between the Russians and Iranians, it was divided into two. Therefore, actually, the territories and everything else on the other side of the Araxes River inside Iran is Azerbaijan. And in that sense, they tend to claim things as Azerbaijani. And the roots of those claims are questionable. And these claims are not only about kings of very famous Persian dynasties who happen to be Turkic tribes in origin. Mind you, Turks or Turkic-speaking people have been ruling Iran for centuries, basically. Even at present, the supreme leader, like him or not, is of Turkish stock. So in that sense, it's very difficult to separate the two. They claim that the Safavid dynasty in the 16th century was Turkish. After that, the Nadir Shah, the Nadiri dynasty was the Afsharids were Turkish, Azerbaijani, that is. And that is true, historically speaking. It doesn't stand the test of truth. The other aspect that's happening is in relation to mosques and religious structures. So there has been, since the Soviet times, this tendency to invent ideas about an Azerbaijani architecture. Now, there's nothing wrong with having an Azerbaijani or Armenian or any kind of architecture for that matter. The point is, how is that Azerbaijani architecture exactly distinctive, let's say, from, I don't know, the architecture across the border inside Iran? And if you look at it carefully, the distinction is very little or pretty much non-existent. And that's where they claim, for example, that the mosque in the so-called Blue Mosque in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, is actually an Azerbaijani mosque. And that, plus some other evidence that they cite, suggests, therefore, that the whole of Yerevan is Azerbaijan and probably it should be given back to them. That's one of the lines of argument. So, and when I say this, you can see how agonism flops when it comes to contexts where you don't have the setup like a European Union and all the niceties that go around, for example, in Brussels. Then we see that it doesn't actually work on the ground because the two sides become locked into intractable situations. And that's the other thing, the other comment I wanted to mention. And you get the same thing in relation to mosques in Shushi or Shusha that have been reconstructed. Azerbaijanis claim that the issue is that Iranians have colluded with Armenians to change the identity of these mosques. And that doesn't seem to stand again, the test of reality or historical fact. But that's what they say. So in any case, and I'm writing something about these issues. I very much welcome if I can be in touch with you and colleagues there and benefit from your insights. I'd be very, very grateful for that. I don't know if I answered your question or not. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ali. You've answered it pretty convincingly, I must say. Is it? No. No. Do you want? Okay. So do you want to ask?
Sorry, my question was for the other things. My question was about how you have cases, Turkish involvement, direct involvement in contemporary Azerbaijan in terms of Iranian and Turkish cultural heritage
Oh,
computation.
sorry, I must have misheard. I do apologize for that. I do not have a case at the moment of the two directly competing, except for the cases of mosques and the claims that are about the Turkish capital made of Shusha that was announced. The Turkish world, capital of the Turkish world, cultural city of the Turkish world, that was announced, and the cases of constructing or reconstructing mosques, in which there seems to be Turkey is not as present by the looks of it, and Iran at the moment is totally non-present or absent. So there is no direct case that I'm aware of, but if you know, please do let me know. I'd be very, very grateful.
Okay. So thank you, Ali. So we are now at the end. So please have a good round of applause for the audience. Thank you. Thanks a lot for all the participants.